we're shining a spotlight this week on Super Mario 64 for the Nintendo 64. It came out in September of 1996 in North America, a little bit earlier in Japan, like usual, June 1996 in Japan. And it was a big Christmas item the year that it came out, along with the Nintendo 64. It was obviously a launch title for the Nintendo 64, one of only two, if you're trying to be super technical, because a bunch of Nintendo 64 games came out the following week. So the only games that were available day one were Mario 64 and Pilot Wings 64. And then everything else that's listed as a launch title for the 64 actually came out the next week or a month later in some cases. Um, so I put together some Mario 64 facts because this is one of those games like when we did Ocarina of Time, where it's like what can be said that hasn't already been said 1,000 times. So I tried to find some interesting pieces of trivia, and then I'm also going to talk about my history with the game, and you do the same. But here's some interesting facts. So the game was originally intended, I'm sure most people know, to be a two-player game with Luigi. Eventually, Luigi was cut due to memory limitations, but in July of 2020, that recently, after 24 years, a leak of an IQ CVS repository, which I'm not sure. I know what the IQ is. It was this like thing that had Nintendo 64 games built into it, but I don't know why this would have been in a CVS repository. But it was posted to 4chan, and the leak included a portion of Super Mario 64's source code. And from that, data miners were able to finally find the Luigi model that was programmed. And I just found that so fascinating that it wasn't until 2020 that people were able to find the actual Luigi model that was designed for Mario 64, at least as far into development as it made it. Because so many years you've seen everything from people taking Luigi from Mario 64 DS to just giving Mario a green color scheme and hacking it that way. I remember I had a Game Shark code that did that. I had a Game Shark code that turned Mario green, and you said you were playing as Luigi. Anyway, so thought that was interesting.
Yeah, so cool.
Ocarina of Time. Yeah. Ocarina of Time also has the L is real plaque. Speaking of the Luigi thing, everyone knows the plaque in the courtyard where the ghosts are. Some people think it says L is real. Some people think it says L is real 2401. And this was one of those things where back in the early days of the internet, there were 1,000 rumors on how you unlock Luigi and how that related to 2401. But it's interesting to note that that asset was reused in Ocarina of Time in Dodongo's cavern. You can see that exact same plaque. So I don't think Luigi's in Ocarina of Time, as far as I know.
I'm surprised it didn't take off as like an early internet meme.
Hmm.
Um, like the L is real, the cake is a lie. You know,
Hmm.
along the
Revive Ares in
yeah,
Final Fantasy VII.
yeah, along the same lines.
Harvest Moon 64, even though it wasn't a very popular game, is a game that had a ton of early internet lies associated with it. Things from like a second photo album to you could build a second floor on your house. And it's because it's like Stardew Valley, a game that has a lot of like events where like you'll walk and like have conversations with characters. There were a lot of rumored events in that game that were just completely bogus. Anyway, voice acting. Charles Martinet voiced Mario and Leslie Swan voiced Princess Peach. This was most people's first exposure to the Charles Martinet Mario voice, even though it wasn't the first time he did it. And I have to say, do you remember your first impression hearing it? Because I remember I didn't like it at the time. I was very used to the Super Mario Brothers Super Show Mario voice.
No memories of that in particular,
It's
but
obviously grown on me, but
but
yeah.
I think it was along the same lines of my overall feeling of like this is a whole different experience. Uh,
Yep.
You know, and you can't go back to that entirely. I mean, replaying some of it this week even, so I don't play it as much. Even doing it some of it this week, and then comparing it to like the HD versions, um, I'm surprised like how good it still looks. I know it's a very
Mhm.
general statement I'm making, but yeah, I think it's
Well,
actually
yeah, there's for sure a lot of Nintendo 64 games that have not aged this well. There's not a lot of fog in this game, which was a very big feature of Nintendo 64 titles. Um, yeah, it is a very crisp, very good-looking game for its time.
yeah. Um,
Super Mario 64 was the best-selling Nintendo 64 game, selling more than 11.6 million copies, which it should be noted, games didn't really sell over 10 million copies back then. That's almost like the equivalent of like a 15 million copy game today. Um,
yeah.
Mario's caps, Mario has the red, green, and metal Mario. I mean, sorry, the red wing. He's got the green cap for metal and the blue for vanish. And an interesting trivia fact is there's a texture in game for Metal Mario wings. So basically combining the two hats, you have Metal Mario and the wing hat. And there's not a single area in the game where you can wear both hats. So it's interesting that they have that as a
Mhm.
model, probably a cut level or something.
You could do a whole
Uh,
episode. You could do like a whole episode on like cut things from Mario 64, couldn't you?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like we haven't even learned half of them. I think they originally said that they designed I have it in the notes here somewhere, or did I get rid of it? No, it's at the bottom. 17 levels were cut from the original plan for Super Mario 64, and very little is known about the 17 levels that were cut and how far along they made it and how finished the design was, especially when stuff like Wet Dry World made it into the game, which feels like it wasn't finished. Um, so yeah, we got 15 levels. We were supposed to have 32 was the original idea. And you know, one more random uh trivia fact here. Just I'm sure most people know this, but if you don't, if you leave Mario idle too long, he falls asleep, and if you leave him asleep long enough, he starts rambling about lasagna and spaghetti. So, just thought that was cool. Do you remember your first experience with the game?
I'm sure it was at a friend's house because I got N64 in like 98 or 99. So I definitely played this game before that. I don't remember which friend's house I was at. I don't know. I mean, I can remember playing it at multiple houses. I can remember playing it quite a bit. Um, don't remember even the first time I actually like had finished it entirely, and I don't think I've ever gotten. Well, no, I know I've never done completion on this game before. So,
Hmm.
fake Nintendo fan or something. Um, but I don't remember if this came up in past segments of the disk drive. But speaking of things that didn't happen, have we talked about Mario 128 on
It's
here?
come up. I don't remember when, but it's definitely come up in the 107 episodes we've had so far. I just don't remember why.
We've talked about the disk. I mean, we've done
Yeah,
multiple episodes
probably
on
there.
the disk drive, and how bad that was. But oh my god, like such a big highlight of it. So Super Mario 128, for those who don't know, is two different things. One, it was a planned game for the disk drive, and two was a tech demo for the GameCube, which showed off rapid generation, which was a technology that was eventually used and inspired the Pikmin game, which is
Hmm.
super cool. So they showed it off in I don't know if it was still Space World in 2000. I'm gonna say it's
Yeah,
Space
it
World.
was.
What I think it
It
was.
was Space World 2000. Yep.
Yeah, Space World 2000, where they show off and you see like all these Marios getting dropped onto this platform, and I just think it's so cool that that became Pikmin, and Pikmin became one of the biggest IPs Nintendo's made in the past, 20 so years, I'll say. Uh, so yeah, that's really cool and just highlights the disk drive's failure of, like, man, back in the day, like having these planned mainline Mario games, especially when you see how much was put into Mario 64 and that
Hmm.
like they actually had like a team planned ready to do it. The disk drive was a really bad part of Nintendo history. Probably cost a lot of money too. Uh, Next question to you, and I want to get into the dangerous parts of this episode. All right, Kevin, is this game overrated? Is it underrated? Does the innovation and nostalgia of this game put too much emphasis on the game and take away from the actual good parts of it? Do some people just need to move on? Do some people need to just try to play other Nintendo or Mario games because they play Mario 64 too much and they just played that in Ocarina of Time all the time? Or is it
I
correctly rated?
think I think it's somewhere in the range of correctly rated to certain sections of the internet. You'll find certain areas of Reddit that are mainly younger gamers, where I feel like it's underrated, and they can't get over the camera controls because I'll admit it's a flaw in the game because it was a brand new thing at the time. Um, but it can't be understated how much this was a literal game changer for the video game industry. Everyone has everyone from the time has listed this game as an influence. Like, just think about the fact that every platforming game, just start there, that came after used this template. Like, Crash Bandicoot is a good example because the first Crash Bandicoot game released the same month as Mario 64. The overworld in that game is like the Super Mario World map, where it's like each level is a dot on a preset like path that you go down. Then by the time they get around to making the sequel, now all of a sudden the overworld is a hub world and each level is you jumping into a portal, just like this game. And like every platformer used that formula after this game came out. You had games like Banjo Kazooie, Spyro, Gex, Enter the Gecko. You had to have a hub world and you had to have a portal that took you to your other worlds. And then in those worlds, you fulfilled an objective that collected you a thing that allowed you to unlock more portals. That was the formula that Mario 64 set into motion and spawned count like so many games. But on top of that, developers who worked on GoldenEye listed this as an influence. GoldenEye was originally it was in development actually at this time, and it started as an on rails shooter like Area 51 or Virtua Cop or something like that, and they listed Mario 64 as an influence for how they could kind of break away from that. Even Grand Theft Auto 3's development team, Grand Theft Auto 3 listed this as an inspiration for their game. So huge, because just think of the impact the games I listed had on the industry, and
Yeah.
that all stems back to this origin point. It's like this cracked the code for how to do things. And then it's like one of those things where it's like you have to know the rules to break them. So even games that don't follow this formula, they know how to not follow it because of this game, if that makes sense. Like if say a platforming game doesn't have a hub world, it knows like Conquer 64 or Conquer's Bad Fur Day, sorry, is a good example of that. It doesn't really have a hub world, but it knows that you still need to maneuver your way from area to area because of this game, and each area has like its own theme. So I don't know. It's a long rant, but I think some sections of the internet definitely are trying to forget the influence this game had and just be like, oh, it's not that great a Mario game. Like, I'd rather play Galaxy or whatever. And this just game changer. You know what?
Uh,
While I'm talking forever, I'm going to talk about my experience when I first got it because I think it's relevant to what I'm saying here.
and one thing I want to add to that too, and then
Oh,
we'll go
sure.
back to that, is that I would go as far as to say that nothing has changed in the video game world when it comes to platforming, and a lot of games have platforming in them. I mean, even if you look at the most modern, I mean, the most recent, like Switch games, if you look at Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, I mean, the hub world is just the overworld. And then,
Hmm.
like the formula I'm saying has not changed in like almost 30 years of like, okay, you have this world and then you go to this place and then you do this puzzle or you do this platforming. And I'm amazed by how much platforming hasn't changed once Nintendo figured out their 3D formula. Again, so much love put into this game. I interrupted
Yeah,
you.
you
So,
could draw a comparison to this was to modern gaming what Super Mario Brothers was to um like retro gaming where the Super Mario Brothers on NES, yes, there were side scrolling platformers like Pitfall on Atari and stuff like that beforehand, but that was the one that did it the best and like set the example. And then you had all these other side scrolling platformers after, and then this changed the game for what we now have today.
so when did you first play the game?
So I was just thinking about this a second ago. I probably first played it on an in-store kiosk. I don't have like a literal memory of the first time I controlled Mario in this game, but I do remember when I first got my copy, which was that Christmas. Like I said, it was a hot holiday item, and my dad and I had this flea market we used to go to every weekend, and it there was a guy there randomly. He had a Nintendo 64 and a Mario 64, a copy of Mario 64. And I think I've told this story on the podcast before. It's a weird memory because I remember specifically, even though it was the hot holiday toy that year, I guess the concept of scalping wasn't as big back then because he sold it for retail price. It was probably stolen, so it was all profit for him. But whatever, he sold it for retail, and we bought it. I remember we paid I think it was 250 for the game and the cartridge, and still in box, still everything. And we got it home, and it was gonna be my Christmas present. We got it like this was probably October ish because it was right when it was brand new. Like I said, maybe November, and unlike any other Christmas of my life, for some reason my parents grasped how big the Nintendo 64 and this game were at the time. They let me play it for like the first day before they packed it away for Christmas. Um, and I remember even my parents wanted to play it, which they don't play video games at all. And I think to them this was the first time a game like didn't look like Pac-Man or like Donkey Kong or something like that. Like this, like they could see like that's a little virtual world in there, and oh, it's so novel. Isn't that really cool that technology has come this far? And like that effect even worked on them who knew nothing about video games. So I'll always remember that day playing it before we had to pack it away for Christmas, and then I opened it up on Christmas and got right into it. I remember being obsessed with Dire Docks, I think is the name of the name, the water level at the beginning. Remember being obsessed with that level, and it's such a good soundtrack to that level. Do you have a favorite level of this?
No, no, that's a
No.
good question. How about you?
I think my favorite level is the Snowman Land. I was thinking of that when I did the notes this week, which is the second snow level. I think it's because it gets slept on a lot. And I think it's actually a really good level. And I think the reason it's very forgettable is it's very good at what it's trying to do. And it doesn't like there's no like frustration with it. There's not like it's not like the desert level where you keep sinking in the sand, or it's not like the fire level where you keep burning yourself or something. There's no frustration memory, and there's no like it's not one of the earlier levels, so you don't remember it because it's a level you've played 1,000 times. It's just a very good, very solid level. I like the igloo. You go in there and you can use the invisible cap to run through the walls and stuff. It's a solid level. So I'm gonna go with Snowman's Land, and I'm always a sucker for snow environments. So that's my pick.
Is your favorite power up Metal Mario?
I think everyone's is, yeah. Metal Mario's, because of the Terminator too. Terminator
Yeah.
2. Um, yeah, it's a really cool power up which they've incorporated as Easter eggs and stuff in later Mario games, but they should really bring it back fully.
I have to bring up speed running when it's relevant, and this game is more relevant than any game we've reviewed, I think. Uh,
Do it.
I'm I'm pretty sure the speed running community could single-handedly keep this game alive forever. Like if
Mhm.
no other people played Mario 64, I'm pretty sure the speedrunners could just do it themselves. Uh, there
Well, it is
are
one of those games. I think Nintendo 64 is notorious for this in speedrunning, where there's a lot of glitches and tricks that you can exploit. Like, have you seen the one where you long? I've never been able to get this to work. I've tried, but that you long jump down the stairs and it like sucks Mario back up through the door, and you can clip your way into the final area. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that's what they use on the any percent.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure. So there's five categories on speedrun.com, and all five categories, whether it's 120 star, any percent, and then they also have I don't know. I guess it's like the main objectives. I don't know. Whatever. Anyways, but all five categories are led by the same speedrunner, which is pretty wild. Someone named Suiji, in Canada. Um, the for the 120 star, the top six are in the last 8 months. One of them was from this week, and the any percent, there are 35 cases where um, they have a sub 7 minute speed run, which is so crazy. And I don't know, the world record right now is 6 minutes 16 seconds. I don't know if anyone's ever going to crack 6 minutes because the world record is a world record by 11 seconds, which in speedrunning 11 seconds is like an eternity, you know.
Yeah.
It's so much, you know. If you look at it in a percentage, it's a lot.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I I don't think we've reviewed a game that has a bigger speedrun community than this. There are tons of fan-made games that people are still making for Mario 64. And I mean, you've mentioned it a little bit. We've been talking on here 25 minutes about this game. The the overall development, the story of this game is so cool.
Mhm.
And it's a piece of work that makes me wonder about, you know, when I look at art or media that like was cultural changing, whether it's music, whether it's gaming, whether it's, literature. I think about like when they were doing it, when they were making it, did they have any idea it was going to have that sort of influence? Because of course, like this, it's the same company, same person that made Mario, Mario 3, they've already done it. They're already there. But when they started doing like developing it in 94, especially when you think about the other games that were around in 1994, I wonder if they had any kind of clue it was going to be this. Like, oh yeah, 30 years later, people are going to be obsessed with this game.
Well, it's nuts to think of how 0 they started from. They really started from 0 with I read one thing once where they talked about how they spent, I don't remember, but a ton of time just on the jumping mechanic because they said they didn't have any other 3D good examples of jumping that they they liked from Mario. So they just had to spend forever trying to get his jump to be right. And I mean, he is Jumpman, so you got to get that right, but still.
Yeah.
That just to me like it's an indicator of like wow, they really started from nothing. They didn't even have a jump mechanic to compare it to.
Right. And it's such a huge project in comparison to other Nintendo projects up to that point, and probably other just gaming in general, where Miyamoto got a team of about 20 people together and said, we're going to start developing a 3D Mario game. And yeah, as you said, they had to start off by they spent so much time in the beginning just looking at models and thinking about
Mhm.
how do we even conceive a 3D world just to begin with? I
Yeah,
mean,
what does a Goomba look like in
yeah,
3D?
yeah. Uh, at the time, like doing over 1,000 sound effects was huge. Doing, real voice acting was still a big thing. So yeah, a 3-year development cycle, and that much money and resources. It's hard to compare it to now where, everything just seems to take forever. But at the time, it had to have been, a huge risk. And, like, it's hard to imagine what would have happened if they didn't get it right the first time. Like, if it just,
Yeah, you would have had well, you would have had a Sonic '06 situation, just 10 years beforehand or because Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast worked, so imagine if Sonic on the Dreamcast was Sonic '06, you know?
Mhm.
You would have had a situation like that, and they would have had to recover from it. They they, they got I don't wanna say got lucky, but it's a good thing it worked for them, or it would have been an equal amount of work to dig themselves out of the hole, I think.
Mhm. And 10 million is quite a lot. I started working on a longer piece about, because we have to compare, it's more about comparing like the install base,
Mhm.
and sales.
Oh, yeah, this is basically like Wii Sports level if you compare it to the install
Yeah.
base.
Well, that's actually the inspiration for this new segment I'm
Okay.
working on, is that, I wonder if Wii Sports was ever a regret or a mistake for Nintendo to make it a pack-in game, because, um, the games compared to the install base for Wii did not sell as well as other consoles. And
You know,
I was thinking about how a lot of people only had Wii Sports.
it's funny you should say that because I'm writing a bonus episode right now about it's like a love letter to the Wii U, and I had a section in there, I'll give it away, whatever, um, about how people wanna act like, "Oh, the Wii sold, what was it like 100 million units and that Nintendo was coming in so high and then the Wii U sunk them and then I had this segment where I'm like really though they weren't as strong as you think going into it because like you just said a lot of the Wii games like a good selling game was like 3 million copies um they have less than 10 games that sold over 10 million on the Wii. One of them is Wii Sports. It's almost like was the Wii popular or was Wii Sports popular? So just a preview of what I've been working on for that bonus episode. But you're totally right.
Right, and so I mean, we're still gonna release it, but that's something I started thinking about because we did our biggest mistakes, and we would assume Wii Sports was a huge success, but I wonder if Nintendo thought, uh-oh, um, Wii Sports might have been too successful,
Yeah.
and then, um, well, did they have pack-in games for Wii U, or was that it after Wii?
They had, if you not for the base model, but if you bought the black one with the 32 gigabyte drive, that came with Nintendo Land, and it also came with an incentive program. I don't remember exactly how it worked for eShop downloads. Like it gave you like eShop money or something. So you got Nintendo Land and like I think half a game. Like they gave you like $10 or something.
Uh, Right, because I just assumed after Wii, it's like, no, we're not gonna do that anymore. Packing games are done.
It's like
Yeah,
what they're rumoring for the Switch 2, which I think is going to happen, is they had a base model and they had a game with a they had if you spent $50 more, you get the system with a game.
Mario Kart.
Yep.
This Mario 64, and this will make people mad if they listen. Number 10 for me. Number 10, and that makes six of my top 10 games, Mario games. Don't be mad at it. I mean, my top 10 games are all bangers. They're
Well,
all
keep in mind this isn't a list of like all time or anything. This is a list of like what's on Nintendo Switch Online, and I
and what I
think
like.
that's very skewed to Nintendo first party
Yeah.
titles.
And this is not like what I think is best. It's just what I enjoy the
Hmm.
most. So wait, all 10? Yes. No. Okay, so top 10, six are Mario, three are Zelda, one is Pokemon. All right. How about you?
One last trivia fact to close us out that I really don't have anywhere else to put this, so I'll just say it here. They tried to develop a mechanic for this game where Mario would ride a horse for, I guess, one of those cut levels. And I don't know why they would do that when they definitely had Yoshi at this point. Super Mario World came out way before this, so why not ride Yoshi? But I've heard that that led to Link riding Epona in Ocarina of Time. So just a trivia fact there. Anyway, I ranked this game number 2 on my list. The only game higher so far is A Link to the Past. Then it's Mario 64. The bulk of my top 10 is Mario and Zelda as well. Let me see. We've got in my top 10 Mario 64, Yoshi's Island, if you count that as a Mario game, and and Super Mario All Stars. And then the rest is A Link to the Past, Majora's Mask, Minish Cap, Ocarina of Time, and Link's Awakening. And then you got Toe Jam and Earl randomly in there with Harvest Moon in there as well. So yeah, number 2 on my list. It is an all-timer. It's like I said, it's one of those games where anytime someone wants to play it, I'll play. Anytime I have some downtime and access to this game, I'll probably play. I've I've said on the podcast before, every time they've released this game, I've gotten 120 stars in all 4 save files. I did it on the 64, I did it on the Wii, I did it on the Wii U, I did it on the Switch, and I did it on the All Stars version. I just will if I have 20 minutes to play video games, like not a lot of time, there's a lot of times where I'll be like, "Oh, I'll get a star. I'll get a star in Mario 64."
We have to talk about it because we didn't do it. Obviously, we would recommend this game to everyone, right? We
Mhm.
recommend to everyone, but um, we didn't talk about the different ways you can play this game. Uh, and
Oh, are you talking about the one-up mushroom?
I'm talking about the different systems. That's another good point.
Oh.
That's
Yeah,
another
no,
that's
people have
another
come
good
up with
point.
alternate like game if you don't know, there's
Yeah,
a one-up mushroom that follows you and people have made like a mini game of seeing how long they can avoid the mushroom before they get the one up.
right.
So that's kind of fun, like little alternate. I
Yeah.
remember even when I was a kid, there was one day where I played it in a mirror because I wanted to see if I could. So like there's something about this game that inspires like creativity too. I set a mirror up and tried playing it that way.
So if you want to play this game today, you have N64, you have Switch Online, You have 3D All Stars. You have what did it 3DS? What did it release on?
Well, the regular DS, but
DS.
that
Yeah,
remake is so different, I'd almost count it as a different game, but
yeah.
I'll give it to you.
But anyways, like N64, NSO, 3D All Stars. Is there a best way to play it, or I mean, you
There's
can't really go
eShop version on the Wii and Wii U as well. Um,
wrong, but is there a best way?
yeah. I like the NSO version, with my Nintendo 64, controller, that might be right now, or even with the Switch controller, it's not bad. There's some Nintendo 64 games that are not good to play with the Switch, the modern control scheme, but this is not one of them. This worked fine for me. Again, I played it on the plane in handheld mode. It played fine.
Can't really go wrong, and I mean, play it. If you haven't played it, you probably have already played it. You've definitely heard
Mm.
about it. So,
Yeah, we're not
yeah,
introducing anyone to this game. That's
yeah.
not something for this week.